Hey, what's up guys? Back again with another video. This time I'm going to show you how to use mJSon, which is a library in Java that allows you to use JSON within your Java projects. So just a brief explanation, mJSon is a Java API or library that allows you to easily convert Java objects into JSON objects, and then of course JSON objects back into Java objects, or even primitive Java types. Having this capability along with the other features that mJSon provides will allow us to easily utilize JSON in our Java projects, like I just said pretty much. And if you want some more information on how this works and how you can use it, then I'll leave the link for this in the description below so you can check it out and you can look at the API in detail, okay? So what we need to do obviously first is install the API or the library within our project or add it to our project, and there's two ways you could do that. Of course, you could first, if you have Maven installed on your system, on your project I mean, you can go ahead and add the dependency to your pom.xml. And then if you don't have that, then you can just go ahead and add it like you would add a normal jar library. Okay, so we can just download it right here. Just click direct link to that. So it's going to download to our computer. Good, now I have that. So make sure you put that somewhere safe so you know where it is. And then you could go here to File, Project Structure, Libraries, and then click plus, and then Java. And now you need to find where you put it. Mine is on the desktop, I believe. There we go. And just try and remember where you put yours, of course, 2 seconds ago. If you have Alzheimer's, that's going to be an issue, but there you go. Click apply once you add the library. Whether you use Maven or the thing that I just did a second ago, if it works correctly, you should be able to do JSON and then dot, and then you have all these methods here. And JSON right here is the class that comes with the mJSon API or library. So now that we have the mJSon library installed, I'm going to show you how to use it. Keep in mind, I'll drop a link again to the description for all the information on this API, along with all the code for today's episode, okay? So one of the most essential things is converting a string representation of a JSON object into an actual JSON object. So right here, what we're going to do is create a regular JSON file so that we can model what we want to have in the first place. Hold on, let me show you what I mean. So we're going to call this stuff.json, okay? And we're going to make a simple example here, and so we're just going to make a simple JSON object. Hopefully, if you're watching this episode, you know how JSON works, how to use it at least. But if you want to learn some more about it, I believe you can go to w3schools.com and you can learn some stuff about there, the basics and stuff like that. So anyway, it's just simple key value pairs. That's basically how it works. So name, and then we can give it a name of Bob. And let's just add some values here. So age, 24. Then we got address. So we're going to add an address as our sub-object. We're going to nest an object inside of this object here. So then we're going to add a street address. Okay, and that's going to be 800 West Campbell. I can't spell. And then we'll have one more value representing a boolean is cool, and we could just say true. Okay, whatever that means. And so we have this object here, right? Let's create a string in our Java program modeled after this so that we can try turning it into a real JSON object rather than just a string. So we just need to convert this basically into a string in Java, okay? Pretty simple, but it's actually not that simple. It's kind of annoying how we have to do it, because if you think about it, each key value pair has to be surrounded by quotes, and those are quotes that are going to be inside of the string itself. So we have a Java string called here. We're going to call this JSON string is equal to, and then we gotta open up the quotes here, open this up like that, go down a little bit to open up some space, and inside of here we need to start adding the key value pairs, okay? So I'm just gonna move this to another screen so I could look at it at the same time. But first we need the name, so the name is gonna be Bob. So we can't actually just do name like that, we actually have to add the quotes around it inside of the quotes that we already have, basically. That's the hard part. That's not hard, but it's really annoying. So just like that, because if you were to add quote quote, it would your Java compiler would get confused basically because you have two quotes just like that. So you need to do that to denote it, so it knows that you're trying to actually have a quote instead of making a new string basically. So now that we have the name, we can also add the value. So Billy Bob, okay, that's our name, like that. And then now we just go to the next one, okay, and just so on. Okay, so I'm just going to fill all of this out so you don't have to see me type all of this, and then when I'm done, I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got it here now, and we can see that we have everything filled out. It's basically just the same thing as we have right here. It's just different, because in Java it's a string, right? So you have to use the forward slash or backslash. I think that's a backslash, and then the quote to represent a quote. Anyway, so it's the same thing pretty much, except that we have to use a bunch of painful stuff and concatenation and all that stuff, so it makes it really hard to do. So now that we have that, we can convert this to an actual JSON object. So now if we want to convert the string that we have here into an actual JSON object, we can do JSON, which is again a object provided by the mJSon library, and then now we can give it a name like we do with any object. So we'll call this JSON object is equal to, and then now we can do JSON dot, and we can use one of the static methods to take this string here as a parameter and convert it, okay? So that would be the read method, so read, and as you can see it takes 3 parameters, URL, location, string, JSON as a string, which is exactly what we have, and then character iterator. So we're gonna use this one, obviously. And so all we gotta do is do JSON string as a parameter, there we go. So if it worked correctly, we should be able to print it out and see the same thing that we have up here, except all together and neat looking, I guess you could say. So let's print it out and see what happens. So yeah, it worked, as you can see, because we have the JSON object as a string right here, because what it's doing behind the scenes is basically, since we're using system.out.println, we're calling upon JSON object.toString, so it's converting it back into a string basically after it has read it and made a new JSON object, okay? So yeah, if it shows up here without any problems, that means it works. That's just exactly how you convert a JSON string into a JSON object, okay? Very simple. So sometimes you're not going to have a full object like you have here. You're maybe going to have like a partial, I like to call it. So you're going to have maybe a variable that you want to represent as a JSON object. You can do that too without any problems, or just part of any thing that you would find within a JSON object you can put into a JSON object, okay? So we can make let's try doing an array here. So we're making an array, so 45, 21, and then we'll have some random values. So we can also have booty, so booty like that, and then after booty we're gonna have false. So we have a wide variety of values within this array here, and so what we're gonna do is take this array and put it basically into a JSON object like we did previously. So it should work the same exact way. So let's see what happens. So if there's no errors basically or anything like that, we know it works. So there we go. So we get 45, 21, booty as a string, and then false. So it worked. Nothing went wrong here, but pretty simple. All you got to do is use the read method, and you can convert any string into a JSON object as long as it's following the rules of JSON, of course, as long as it's a valid JSON, okay? So this is one way to make an array within JSON, but if you know beforehand that you're going to be making an array, there's also an array method that you can use. So let's say we have, well, let's make a new JSON array here. So JSON array is equal to JSON dot, and then you can call upon the array method, okay? And there's 2 versions, obviously, of this array method here. And if you leave it empty, that means that it's basically just going to return a empty array, and that's just going to be what you're having within this object here. But if you use this one here, you can provide some parameters which are going to serve as the values for the array, okay? So it doesn't really matter if it's empty or not. As long as you have the array method, then you can make an array and then store it as a JSON object, which, yeah, so you can do that, okay? So let's put some values in here. We'll do poopity, we'll do doopity, then we'll do false, true, just, you know, any random values, and then 4.3245, anything like that. And this should work the same exact way. So if we print it out, no problems should have occurred if we did that correctly. And let's see what happens. And boom, we get our array right here. Looks good to me. So that's how you represent a JSON object holding an array, okay? So yeah, hopefully by now you understand the concept. I didn't say it explicitly, but you can basically make a JSON object here, and then that JSON object can hold any value that you would find within a JSON object within a JSON file. So it could hold a string by itself, it could hold an age, a number, a sub object, or an object itself, I mean. It could hold a Boolean value. It doesn't have to be a complete object is what I'm trying to say. It can hold arrays, it can hold anything that you'd find valid within a JSON object, because just so that we can manipulate it and stuff like that, okay? Anyway, so now we can use the JSON.make method, which is going to allow you to convert any Java type, any primitive type, and some other values into JSON objects, basically. Okay, so let's say we use the make method here. We can convert 45 into a JSON object, and no problems are going to occur because it's able to recognize that we're passing in an object that is a valid JSON, and then it's going to convert that into a JSON object. It's really simple. but that's not really why you use the make method usually. What you usually use it for is for converting collections. So let's say you have an array list, okay? So we have an array list of string values maybe. So string, so we'll just call this strings obviously because it's holding a bunch of string values, is equal to a new array list, and inside of here we're just going to put a bunch of values just to fill it up a little bit. So we'll say Kevin, LaShawn is the best rapper. Alright, actually let's make a further modification to this. Let's say strings.add second best rapper, because we all know who's the best, Juice WRLD obviously. Anyway, so now that we have this array list here, we can somehow use this make method here to convert this array list into something that we can represent in a JSON object. So if we were to do this, let's see what happens. So strings, so what it's doing here is we're using the make method, so it's going to convert the strings array list into something that can be represented within a JSON object, like I just said 2 seconds ago. Anyway, so let's print this out and see what happens and what it's going to be represented like. Alright, so we have our value down here, we can see, and something a little interesting happened. It was represented as an array, and that is usually what happens with regular collections like array lists and stuff like that. And that is because an array list is basically an array. I mean, it's just a array of objects, I guess you could call it. And so the only way to represent an array of objects within JSON is just to convert that into an array and then put it as an array within the JSON object. And so that's exactly what's happening. We're taking this strings object that we have up here, this array list, and then converting it to an array and then storing it within this JSON object. And so let's say we have something a little more complicated, a collection, a hash map collection. Okay, so we'll do hash map, and this time we'll have string and then boolean as the two types. And make sure it's capital B boolean, because the primitive type, you can't use a primitive type. You'd have to use its class for the primitive type. But yeah, just make sure it's capital. Anyway, so we have a hash map here, and so this hash map is going to represent some names. Okay, so names is equal to new hash map, like that. And so inside of this hash map, let's put some values. So names dot put, and we'll say Cody, and then true. So I'm cool, so that's why I put true, by the way. So names dot put, and we'll say Noah, and he's obviously not cool. I mean, that's kind of obvious, so we'll put false. And then Damascus, let's put medium, but medium's not a boolean value, so we can just downgrade that to false. And then we'll do one more person. He's a little irrelevant, but we'll do cool Mike 35, and he's obviously not cool, so we'll put false. Okay, so there's not many cool people that I know, but you know. So now that we have this hash map here with the key value pairs of string and boolean, so key value, key value, key value, key value, this is going to be a little different from the array list, because since it's in the structure of a key value pair, it's going to be converted to an object instead of an array like the array list is. So the array list is only really a list of objects that, you know, is one after another, but a hash map is a little more complicated because a hash map is a key value pair type of list. So each key value pair is matched together, and that's exactly what's happening within a JSON object, right? Key value, key value, key, or key value, key value, key value. So we can simply represent a hash map as a JSON object because it's basically doing the same thing behind the scenes with the key value pair thing. So hopefully that makes sense, just the key value pair concept. So if we pass in names just like that, instead of a array this time, we should get a object. And boom, now we get an object here. We know it's an object because it's surrounded by curly brackets. So we can see the key of cool Mike 35 is false, Damascus false, Cody true, and then Noah false. And for some reason it's alphabetized. I don't know the correct word. I hope that's the correct word. But it's put in alphabetical order. I don't know why it does that, but it just does. So anyway, not too big of an issue. But yeah, that's how that works. Hopefully that concept makes sense. Whenever you use regular collections, like maybe in a list or an array list, any of its, you know, subclasses or anything like that, it's going to be converted to an array because it's only like one-dimensional basically, because it only has one object. But then if you use a map type, so if it's basically two-dimensional, meaning it has a key value pair type structure or something like that, it's going to be represented as an object within JSON. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I hope I didn't mess up that explanation, but that's how that works. So the next thing will be taking this object here, this JSON object, and then converting it into a JSON object within Java. So basically what we did 2 seconds ago is make a string object representing the previous thing that we had here, this one right here. And so we represented this as a string, and then we could use the read method to convert that into a JSON object. But this time we have a new object here, and instead of using a string, let's just directly use the static method from JSON to make a JSON object. Okay, so it's just another way to make a JSON object, basically, is what I want to show you. So we're going to do JSON, we're going to call this JSON object, that's fine. And that's going to be equal to JSON.object. And we can use this object method to make a new JSON object, right? Obviously. And if we leave it empty, that means that we're just going to have an empty object. But if we fill it with values, we can see if you do Control-P, it's a variable arguments type of parameter thing that we have set up here. So we can provide an unlimited amount of parameters as long as they're key value pair. So basically like this, okay? So let's say we want to take this object here and represent it as an object, as a Java object. We could first do vehicle type is equal to car. So let's try that out. So vehicle type, and then the next value needs to be the values. So the way this is going to work is basically we have a key here, and then we have the pair. So then we can just go to the next parameter. The next two parameters is going to repeat the same thing. So the next one's going to represent the next key. So name. So name is going to be this, and then now we need the value of that, which is going to be the next parameter, which is going to be Tesla Model X, like that, and so on. Right? We're just going to repeat that over and over and over for each key value pair that we want to add to this object that we're constructing. Also, something a little cool that you can do is just press the enter to move everything to the new line, so it's a little bit more structured. So now we have name, then we're going to do wheels, so for wheels, so wheels, and so since we're using parameters, we can just provide for the number without quotes around it because it knows that it's a number, right? So it's just going to be converted to its corresponding type within this JSON object here. So it's pretty intelligent in that way. Anyway, so let's move on to the next thing. We want to represent an array here. So there's kind of like two ways we could do this. We could just copy this if you want to, by the way, and then we could go to here and do, well, we need the key first, so passengers. And by the way, I keep referring to these names here as keys, but they're also called property names. That's another way to reference them. So if you want to call them that, that's fine. Doesn't really matter. And so now we could just do JSON.array and then pass in, oops, not like that. Pass in the values just like that, okay? Or we can just make a separate object here. So what's it called? JSON passengers is equal to JSON array. Yeah, of course you could do that. So I mean, that's preference really, how you want to do it. So passengers, and then now let's move on to the next one, which is the final value. So is electric true? That's a Boolean. So is electric, and that's going to be true. Okay, very simple. So now let's print it out to see if it works correctly, if we messed up or not. All right, so we get our object here. We can see that it has wheels for passengers, Bob, Shirley, Ricky, Andrew, and Trump. And then is electric true? Name Tesla Model X, vehicle type car. So it has everything that we just added a second ago. So we know it works correctly, which is pretty cool. All right, so hopefully that's all been pretty simple so far. All these different methods that you can use to, mess around with the mJSon API or library, whatever you want to call it. So it's pretty simple. So now we want to move on to something a little more useful, which is going to be getting data from a JSON object. So we can now derive JSON objects from somewhere if we need to, but now let's get the data from the JSON objects in some way by accessing its methods or using its methods to access the data. So while we go over these methods, let's just use the object that we already have as our little test here, so we don't have to make any new ones. All right, so the first thing I want to show you is the @ method, which is pretty simple like all the other ones we've gone over so far. So this is going to be for accessing a specific value from a JSON object or array. So let's say we want to access one of these values here. So like we want to access the name of the object that we have. So the name value from here. So we just need to do, let's print it out by the way. So we'll do system.out JSON object.at, and then all you got to do is provide the index or the property of where you want to access it from. So the key basically is what you need to provide if you're accessing from an object. So if you want the name, all we got to do is provide name, and then it should return Tesla Model X if it works correctly. Boom, there we go. So we get Tesla Model X. And if you might have noticed a second ago, you could also provide, if you do Control-P, you can also provide an index, which is useful for using the @ method upon arrays. So we could do that if you want to access passengers. And let's say we want to access Ricky from this array here. That would be 0, 1, 2, because it's 0 based. So just pass in 2 for the index, then press play, and it should access it and just print it out. Ricky, there we go. Let's just do one more little practice here. We'll do JSON object. Let's get the wheels. So how many wheels there are in this object here. So wheels, and let's run this. Let's see what we get. And there we go. We get 4 wheels. Pretty simple. And so now let's get a little more advanced here. Let's try storing a value into a variable by accessing it with the add method, okay? So we're going to make a variable here, and we're going to call this integer number of wheels is equal to, and all we got to do is do JSON object dot at, and then just provide the name, so wheels. So now that we have the wheels value accessed basically with the add method, we can do dot get value, which is just going to return a Java object which represents the value stored at the value location of wheels, okay? But we have a little issue here. It says incompatible types. On the left side we have an integer, obviously, but on the right side we have a object, which is going to be, it could be anything, right? But since we know that wheels is going to be a number, or an integer in this case, we could just cast it to an integer like so, just integer like that, okay? So it should work since we casted it. And let's, oh yeah, we need to print it out now just to see if it works correctly. So oh, that's why it didn't work. So num of wheels, there we go. Num of wheels. Come on, buddy. There we go. Number of wheels. Let's print that out. And so now we're going to get 4 because 4 is the value of wheels within our object here. But let's say you don't want to have to cast it and stuff like that. If you know beforehand what the type is going to be, like we did in this case, we can just use the instead we could just use dot as, and with this we can pretty much represent what we're trying to grab as any of the primitive types, and then some other special types like string, JSON list, JSON map, pretty simple. So we know it's an integer, so all we got to do is do as integer like that. And so we don't have to cast it anymore. This becomes obsolete, or redundant rather. And so we can delete that, and now we know it's returning an integer, so we can print it out and it should do the same exact thing just because we're returning as an integer, okay? So let's test it out some more. Let's try doing is electric this time. So we're going to do a boolean here. So boolean is electric is equal to JSON object dot at is electric, and then dot as boolean, because we know it's a boolean obviously. So now it's going to return a boolean representing the value of is electric, and that should be true because we have it here as true. And so boolean is electric should be equal to true. So let's test it out by printing it out, and yeah, there we go. And boom, now we get true. Very simple. So when it comes to messing around with data types and stuff like that within our JSON objects, there's one more method we could use. The is method, the is number method, the is boolean method, the is float method, all those different methods. So let me show you. So we could have an if statement here. We could say if JSON object dot at wheels dot is, and now we can see we have all these is methods here. So is number, is array, is boolean, is null, is object, is primitive, is string, and we could just use these methods here to figure out what kind of data we're messing around with. So we can return, or let's just play around with this. So we'll do is null. So if it's null, we're just going to say s out null, but we know it's not null obviously. So let's try doing else if JSON object dot is number, because we know it's a number. So if it's a number, not that, we want to do at wheels dot is number. There we go. So if it's a number, then we want to just do it's a number. Okay, very simple. So let's print this out. So yeah, of course in the console it says it's a number because it's not null since it's equal to something, 4, and it's a number because 4 is obviously a number. Okay, very simple, but that's how you do that, okay? Now let's say we have an array like we do right up here. Currently it's represented as a JSON object within the mJSon library. So if we want to convert this array here back into a regular Java array, or you can just do a list. So we could do list string, because we know it's a bunch of strings up here. And so make sure you import that, by the way. So list string, and we could call this names is equal to passengers dot as list, and that's just going to return a list for us to use. And there we go. So that's how you convert. Oops, what's the problem here? So on the left side you have a string, on the right side you have an object. So why is that? Let's try that. Cast it. Okay, yeah, so you have to use object rather as the type. That's fine. So now if we want to access values from this list that we just created, of course all we got to do is do names.get and then provide the index. So if you want to access Bob, for example, we'll just put 0 like that. And now we can print that out and we'll get Bob. Okay? Very, very simple yet again. Okay, so at this point we can create JSON objects and then we can access them to see their values. But that's not enough. We also need to be able to alter the JSON objects, change the values within them, add new data, do stuff like that, right? So if you ever need to change the values or edit the JSON objects in any way, the following methods that I'm going to teach you are going to enable you to do that, okay? So the first method that I want to show you is the set method. All you got to do is provide the name of the value that you want to change, and it's going to allow you to replace that data with something else. Okay, so for example, with our JSON object here, we can do JSON object.set, and all we got to do is provide either an index if we're working with an array, or we can do a property name, which is going to be any of these on the left side here. Okay, so let's say we want to change the name of the object here to something else besides Tesla Model X. All we got to do is first specify the name, so we'll do that here. So name, so that's how we identify it. Oops, like that. And then now we give the new value, which is what we're going to replace it with. And we're just going to name it, let's name it Ford F-150. That's a truck. So there we go. And while we're at it, let's also reset vehicle type to truck or something like that. So set object, set vehicle type, and we'll put that as truck. There we go. Cool, simple. So now let's print out a JSON object again to see how it looks after we've done the manipulation to it. So run this now, and let's see if it adds our new value. So now we can see that our vehicle type is now truck, capital T, and then Ford F-150 is our name. Pretty cool, very simple. That's how you set individual the values for an object. Also, you can do arrays. So let's say we want to change the passengers array here. So we do passengers.set, and let's say we want to change Shirley to something else. So 1 for the index of 2, and we're going to change Shirley to let's just change it to Cody because that's my name, I think. And then now let's print out the passengers JSON object just to see if the array still holds the same besides the new value that we put in. And there we go. So we got all the new values, all the original values with the new value inside of it. Pretty simple. All we did was replace it. So that's how you replace different values. But so sometimes you might want to add a new value to one of your objects or your array. But if you try adding a new value to the array with the set method like we used a second ago, it's going to give you a array index out of bounds exception because you can't use an index that doesn't exist already. So for example, if we try doing passengers.set, and currently we only have 5 values, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you want to add a 5th or 6th value, we can do set 5 and then blah blah blah. We should get that exception just because we can't access 5 because it doesn't exist, right? There we go. So we get the index out of bounds exception, similar to what I just said. So now instead we could just do .add and then just add the value like that. So now we'll do pence or something like that, right? For the vice president. So if we print out passengers now, it should work. If my crap will freaking load. There we go. Passengers, semicolon, run. And it should print out the new. There we go. So yeah, we get it now. The array has been added with the new value with the add method. Okay, very simple. So now that we can change values within our objects and we can add values, so let's also look at how to delete values. That's also very essential. So all we gotta do, let's say we want to delete the passengers array from our object here. First, let's print out what it looks like originally, so JSON object, and then we'll do JSON object dot, and then you have two options. You could do delete at, and then give the index or the property name, or you could do at delete, which is not only going to delete it, but it's also going to return the value that you just deleted. Kind of interesting, but I prefer delete at. It doesn't really matter, I guess. But anyway, so just pass in the value that you want to change, the property name, or the index if it's an array. So we'll do passengers now, and that should remove the entire passengers key value pair from our object. So let's print out the new object after it's been manipulated. So JSON object just like that, and let's see if it works. Boom, now it says, so the first one here, wheels for passengers, blah, 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 electric chew, name, Tesla Model X, a vehicle type car. And then down here we have the same exact thing, except that it doesn't have the passengers array because we just deleted it, right? Alright, so the final thing that I want to show you is how to merge two objects together. So JSON, we're going to call this object, let's call it more vehicle info. And this one will be called vehicle, since it describes a vehicle, obviously. So more vehicle info, let's say we have some new information that we just discovered somehow, and we're going to have it represented in this object here. So we're going to have speed 10, and then after that color purple. Okay, so let's say we have this new information here, and so we need to add it to the original one so that we have a complete object of information. We can merge it by doing vehicle dot with, and then just pass in the new object that you want to merge it with, like that. So now we can print out the original one, and it should be merged together to form one complete object, okay? And now we get everything, including color purple, and then speed at 10. Very simple. So that's how you merge an object, but you can also do it, obviously, like with anything else. You can also do it with, arrays, right? So let's say we have an array here. We have an array of passengers, and passengers with, and we could just pass in some new values if we want to. So, and inside of here we could simply do JSON.array, if that's how we want to do it at least, and then we could pass in some new values like poop, scoop, and choop. Okay, so now we should be able to print out one extended array, like the old one basically, but with all these new values added on top of it. And yeah, there we go. So we get all of that. Alright guys, so that's pretty much it for the mJSon library tutorial. I showed you all the different methods you can use to manipulate JSON objects in different ways. Well, I started off with creating JSON objects in two different ways, either with a string or by the static method of object. Then how to access the data with the at method and the other methods that come along with that. Then also how to manipulate the objects by editing the values one at a time and stuff like that. How to delete the objects, and then finally how to merge the objects. Very simple. If you have any questions about what I showed you today, you can ask in the comment section below. I'll be glad to help you, or you can join our Discord server. And whenever you join the Discord server, you can ask questions there, leave suggestions. Again, in the description, I'll leave the link for the library so you can check it out for yourself and look at it in detail if there's anything you want to see. And then also I'll leave a book reference that I use for this episode. There's a good book that I recommend reading for this. So I'll leave the link for that in the description below also. And then finally, I also made a written tutorial along with this episode. So you can see here, I have everything that this tutorial covered. And you can read it and stuff like that. It's a full written tutorial in case you want to read it as you watch the video, or just save it for later on. So make sure to bookmark this. I'll leave the link for it. And then you could use this as a reference whenever you need to use it, okay? Anyway, so that's that. And also, if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for $1, $5, or $10 a month, and you can cancel anytime if you want to. And that's it. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and peace.